For frame and panel door construction, raised panels are by far probably the most common type of panel. And as such, I tend not to use them very frequently. Being so common, I find less interest in them. However, that's not to say that they're bad. I just think that the edge treatments that they use to raise the panel have been done and done and done and go far, far back in history. So they've become very common. So when you're building or designing furniture, you try to explore different areas to change things, to see if it changes the visual appeal. Now, a typical raised panel form would have this nice OG shape, as I'm showing here. And I think that there's a possibility that having a nice sharp radius coming up, so that it's almost a real tight radius and almost a vertical wall as it comes up to meet with the face of the panel. So we're going to try something with a white side part number 1374 router bit. And this bit is used for dishing out material to create a tray and wood and so forth. Now I'm going to take this in several passes working in, and I'm just going to go 1/4 inch deep, and it has a 1/4 inch radius on the edge, so it'll come up and meet up with the face of our panel very sharply. So let's see how that looks when we get it all done. We'll get the router bit installed in the router table, get our fence adjusted up right, and give it a try. Now, as I mentioned, I'll be taking this in several passes. Of course, each cut will start out working on the end grain first, and then we'll do the long grain. And then once I go all the way around once, I'll move the fence over about 1/4 inch, taking another cut, and I'll just keep working my way in until I get what I think looks pretty good to my eye. Now keep in mind that this would be frame and panel, so our groove in the stiles and rails would cover up about this much on the sides, top and bottom. But all around it actually is a very nice looking panel. That real tight radius creates a real strong transition between our face area and then the recessed area along the sides. Creates a nice strong shadow line, as I see here, and it transitions out nice with almost like a miter look where the two radii come together off of the top and sides. All around, it's a very attractive panel. Now, I've been kind of thinking maybe if I rounded over this, but I think I wouldn't. I'd leave it just as it is. Perhaps just a light touch with some sandpaper so it isn't a sharp edge, but I like the look. Now I wonder how it would look using a larger radius. Now this was a 1/4 inch radius here. This would be a 1/2 inch radius. And it's a full ball-nosed router bit, so I know I'm not going to be able to get a flat surface in this area. So first I'll have to go through with a regular router bit, flatten out this area, and then follow it up with a 1/2 inch radius router bit. Let's see how that looks. Using a 1 inch diameter router bit, I'll go through, create a rabbet. I'll probably take this in 2 passes, moving the fence over slightly to finish it up. Just as we did before, I'll do the end grain first and then the long grain. Now I've switched over to the 1/2 inch radius ball nose router bit, and what I want to do is bring it up to the same height we were cutting at before, or perhaps just a little bit shallow. Now, just working by eye, I'll line up my router bit so it blends in nicely where our square corners leave off. Bring in our fence and lock everything down to take that final cut. Well, that came out very nice. The reveal appears to be about right, especially once I visualize blocking out where the stiles and rails will be. It's actually quite traditional looking, but with that tighter 1/2 inch radius that isn't a full radius, it adds a slightly more contemporary look perhaps. All around very attractive. Actually, I think I like this one better than our first attempt on this side. If this one maybe I had a little wider area back here, it might work better for me. But right now I really favor the look of this panel. It's a very nice looking panel. Now this next treatment that we're going to try, I've actually done on another piece of furniture before. And it's going to follow a very similar process to what we just did on this panel. except in this case, we'll create that wide rabbet all the way around, and then instead of having a radius here, we'll leave that a sharp corner, and then just put a small chamfer up on the face of that raised panel, and it creates a nice visual effect. Now, another thing I'd like to point out on this particular piece, although it's got tear out and so forth in it, but this dark streak up the center, that can very well be a good design element in a piece of furniture. So don't often just discard these pieces that have unusual grain patterns or dark streaks where the heart and sapwood come together. Try to work with them when you can. It creates a nice, unique look to the workpiece. Once again, we're back at the router table with the straight cutting bit, and we'll start machining in that rabbet. Doing my end grain first, then the long grain, and I'll probably take it in a couple passes. Now I've gone through and removed my pilot bearing for the chamfer bit, got it installed in my router. Now there's something I want to point out here. On this particular model of chamfering bit, it has this boss here, and that helps support the bearing. And then of course the screw comes in through the top. Now this particular boss stands proud 1/8 of an inch. So we have to keep in mind when we're setting our router bit height that we don't come up too high and allow that boss to rub on our rabbeted area. And we'll go just a little bit lower. I'm going to allow about a 32nd of clearance there, so I'm sure it won't hit. Using a flashlight, I can see under there and align my router bit so that I end up with about a 3/32 of an inch chamfer. With all the adjustments done, we can plug the router back in and take our cuts. Now, as luck would have it, I ended up machining my raised panel on the wrong side of the board, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. However, I think it works out very well. Now, there's some of you that are going to be questioning this type of design right away. We all know that wood expands and contracts with changes in humidity. Now, most modern homes have air conditioning and humidifiers and so forth to keep it comfortable in the home. And I've found that in practice, I've allowed a 1/4 inch gap between the edge of the stiles and rails, 1/4 inch gap in this area, and I've never seen it change enough where you would visually see that gap closing up. The panel just isn't going to move that much. It may move a 1/16 or probably less on a panel of about this size throughout the seasonal changes, but it's really not enough for the eye to pick up. Now again, this one was just simply a rabbet and then a slight chamfer all the way around, and that chamfer is about 3/32 of an inch, and it creates a nice looking panel. Now, years back when I originally designed this type of panel, I wondered what it would look like if I just went from this point straight up to here with a chamfer, just a large chamfer, no vertical surface at all. However, at that time I didn't quite have enough to give it a try. Now is a great opportunity to see what it'd look like. Back to the router table, and let's give it a try again. And as we did before, we'll get started with a straight router bit to create the rabbet around. And I'll go a 1/4 inch deep and about 5/8 of an inch wide. Now on our last bit, we used a conventional chamfering bit, which is meant to be used with a pilot bearing on it. Well, I didn't want to grind off that little boss because it was a very good chamfering bit, and I didn't have an extra one that's, we'll say, in rough shape. So I decided to try my locking miter joint, another white side router bit, and it's a joinery bit for joining together two pieces at a right angle on a miter joint. However, this top portion, this first chamfer area, is a 1/4 inch in height, so that'll work perfect for what we want to do. So I'm just going to use this top portion of my locking miter joint router bit for this application. And as we did before, we'll adjust the height so that the router bit is almost touching that surface. I'd rather it not touch and take a second cut than to goof up the panel by cutting too deep. Now the width of my rabbet is 5/8 of an inch. So if I take this small leading edge of the router bit and make that point 5/8 away from the fence, we'll have our chamfer set just right. And now with everything adjusted and set up correctly, we can plug in the router and take our cuts. Well, now I got my dark streak back up through the center of the panel, and I like that, but that's not what we're to focus on. Let's take a look at our chamfer, and I very much like that. It's a very interesting look. It's very crisp, very clean. The shadow lines are very striking, especially with that nice sharp line where the chamfer blends in down here at the rabbit and where it comes up at the face. That's a very interesting design, and I like that. We just may see that on a future project. Now that I got a real good idea of how a convex radius is going to look in those areas, both a small one and a larger one, I wonder how it would look with a convex radius. So let's find out over at the router table. Now, as you can see, I've already gone through and cut the rabbet. And in order for us to radius with a convex radius all the way flush up with this rabbet surface, I had to modify my router bit. Now, this particular router bit's got a chunk out of it right here, a big chip, so I really wasn't concerned if I modified it at all. All I had to do is take the pilot bearing off and then grind down that boss so it's flush in this area. And that allows the router bit to get all the way up against our rabbeted area, allowing us to cut right up flush with the edge. We'll bring the router bit up so it just misses this bottom surface where our rabbet is. Now, the width of this particular rabbet is 11/16 of an inch. So what I want to do is over here at the router bit, set this point on the router bit 11/16 of an inch away from the fence. Well, here we are with our round over on it. It looks pretty interesting. Can't say for sure as if I like it though. It'll definitely be something that I'll keep in mind, but I'm just not sure I like it. Now, as we experiment through on these raised panels, the one thing you have to keep in mind is you also have to try and visualize the area missing, and that would be, of course, hidden in the groove of the stiles and rails. But we've got our large concave radius, our small concave radius, our convex radiused panel, and that one I'm just not sure on. I'll keep it in my mind, but I'm not sold on it yet. Then we've got our rabbeted with a straight wall along with a small chamfer, and that one I've done before, so I knew that one would appeal to my eye. And as I mentioned, I didn't have the courage to try a full chamfer, and I really wished I would have, because I really like that look. That's something that really pleases my eye. So that gives you a general idea of what we can do with raised panels that's a little bit out of the ordinary and certainly breaking with tradition a bit. Now let's try a fluted panel. I've got this one set up somewhat like a raised panel. I've got a rabbet around the edge so it could fit into a frame. And I do want my flutes so that they end at a valley near the outside edges, left to right on that panel, so that they blend down into that rabbeted area. So that means that our cutter is going to have to start right on the center line point of where the edge of the raised portion is going to be. To cut the flutes, I'm going to be using a molding head cutter that I'll be putting in the table saw. This particular setup is going to have a 1/2 inch radius knife in it. And that should give me a nice flute that I'm looking for. And of course, these come in a variety of different radii, 1/2, 3/8, 1/4 inch, and so forth. This is the size that I think will look pretty good for what we're trying to do. So we'll get that installed and start the setup. And of course, anytime you're changing saw blades, make sure you unplug your table saw for safety. The raised portion of my panel is 1/4 inch, so I know I need to get my molding head cutter adjusted so that it's approximately 1/4 inch up above from the table surface. And I will adjust that up or down ever so slightly if I need to vary the width of my flute. Using my dial caliper, I'll now measure my width. And it's about 860 thousandths of an inch, slightly less than 7/8. Now I know that when I make the next one over, I want to have a nice little flat between the two. I don't really want a perfect knife edge. And that's so when we're feeding the stock over on the saw, that there's some support along each of the cuts as we work our way across that board. So I do want to leave a very, very slight flat between the two. So that tells me that my step over distance has to be slightly more than 860 thousandths of an inch. Now I also mentioned that at the ends I want it to end in a valley, not at a peak right here. So I want it to sweep down. So now what I need to do is calculate the number of these that I can put across the face of this panel. So we'll take that 10-inch width and divide it by 860 thousandths, and that gives us an 11.62 cuts. Well, we know we can't have a 0.62 of a cut if we want the two ends to blend down nicely. Now, because these two end cuts are actually, we'll call them half cuts, they're not a full width cut, we're going to take our number here, the 10 inches, and we know we can get at least 11.6 of these in there. So let's take the 10 inches and divide it by 11 total cuts, and we'll end up with 909 thousandths of an inch between each of these cuts. So that'll be my step over distance. Now our next step is to line up the edge of our raised portion on the center of the cutter, and that'll take some measuring. But once you get that set, we're ready for our first cut. Now, according to our calculations, we need to index the part over 909 thousandths of an inch for each successive cut. Now, measuring that with a scale or even the built-in scale on the table saw is really going to be very difficult. That's when I turn to my precision tools. I've built an adapter here that allows me to clamp on and mount up a dial indicator. This happens to be a 1-inch travel dial indicator. You can pick these up in all the woodworking stores. I would recommend that if you pick up a dial indicator, get it as a kit with the mag base. That way you know everything will fit together nice, even if you end up building your own little jigs to help hold it. So what we'll do, we'll bring our dial indicator into contact with our fence. Now I know I need to move my fence in that direction. So what I'll do is I'll bring my indicator up all the way to the end of its travel, which is 1 inch. Then I'll clamp the jig down, and then I'll set it 0. Now what I need to do is move my fence away from the indicator 909 thousandths of an inch. The indicator makes it very easy to do. We just count the number of turns on that needle. There's 900. And 9 thousandths of an inch. Very easy to do, very accurate indexing. Now we're ready for our next cut. Now we just advance our dial indicator back up again. Reset at 0. And then move over another 909 thousandths of an inch. And we'll repeat this until we get all of the cuts done. And as you can see, it worked out very nice. We've got evenly spaced flutes. Of course, working with a dial indicator with a thousandths of an inch resolution, it's quite easy to achieve that level of precision. The surface finishes inside the flutes are relatively smooth. It will still require sanding. To finish this up, you could use a 1-inch diameter dowel with sandpaper wrapped around it and just work back and forth in here to finish sand it. Now, of course, this is for a raised panel door. We've got our blend where it comes down off the flute, blending out to the side. And right here's where your stile would be, and of course your rails at the top and bottom. Now, when doing this type of texture work, always check it against a light. I've got a side light coming in here so I can see the shadow lines to see if it's giving me the effect that I want. And it's actually quite an attractive panel. Now let's see if we can modify this a little bit. And let's say that it's going to be a solid door panel. It won't be in a raised panel or a field panel in a frame and panel construction. So what I'll do is I'll rip off this material out here, and then we'll take a look at it again. Now with our rabbited area ripped off, we can get an idea how this panel would work out as a solid panel door. It actually still looks quite attractive. The top and bottom edges, I'm not sure I like that. I think there's something that we could do there where these flutes terminate at both the top and bottom that could be perhaps more attractive. So let's see what we can come up with there for another decorative element. The area that I'm focusing on right now is where these flutes terminate. I think if I bevel them, that might look rather interesting. So what we'll do, set up the table saw with my saw blade tilted over at 30 degrees. We'll give that a try, and maybe even try it again at 45 degrees to see if the visual effect is either better or worse. With the saw blade tilted at 30 degrees, I really didn't end up with much of a bevel there, so it really didn't give me much visual effect. However, at 45 degrees, the bevel is much longer, and it creates a very interesting visual effect. So I think the 45 degree is a winning solution. Now in some cases, a fully fluted panel like this may be just the effect that you're looking for. But let's consider another possibility. What if we were to only run 2 or possibly 3 flutes along the face of the panel? So we'll give that a try on the back side of this panel and see how that looks. Back to the molding head cutter with the same height settings and so forth. We'll just take and make 2 flutes in there and see how that looks. Well, that worked out pretty nice. It's a nice effect. Gives it a unique pattern. Being asymmetrical like this, where we've just got 2 along one edge and the rest of the panel open, looks rather attractive. But I think we can modify this a little bit further. I'm thinking that if I add a saw cut right along here like so, just taking my regular saw blade, making 2 grooves on either side, or 1 groove on either side of our 2 flutes, that could really highlight and emphasize these. So let's give that a try. Now just by eye, what I'm going to do is adjust my fence over so that I'll end up with a flat area about the same size as I have between the 2 flutes. And I'll just line that up over the kerf cut in my zero clearance insert plate. And I've got the saw blade raised up to the same depth as our flute. Well, I really like what that extra cut did in there. It created this nice deep groove which creates a very dark shadow line. That shadow line your mind picks up almost as a black streak, so it really draws attention to the flutes and sets them apart from the rest of the panel. So that should give you a couple of ideas on how to work with flutes on panel doors, either raised panel or even just a solid wood panel door.